for me, running is often a metaphor for what's happened in my life, in that I feel like when I'm running, I always want to give up. I always want to stop because it hurts so much. And we can all stop, right? You talk about your hill raiser, and you could stop, but you don't want to stop. And you'll do everything not to stop. And that, for me, was really, really important. And to finish an event or a race, having given everything, frankly.
No whining.
No quitting.
Overcome.
Community. Teamwork.
Tough Mudder.
Tougher together.
Hey to my Mudder family, OCR brothers and sisters, and to you listening right now. We do share a world together, so you're my peeps too. I am your mirror man and host of Tough Mudder's No Excuses podcast, Sean Corvell. Kevin Betts. He is one of our Mudder brothers in the UK, and he is a strong advocate for mental health and suicide prevention. And as a way of recognizing September being Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and September 10th is Suicide Prevention Awareness Day, Tough Mudder will feature Kevin sharing his personal and powerful story regarding his family experience with suicide in this episode of No Excuses. One of the first things Kevin said to me during this interview is that he didn't want this to be a sob story, and it isn't. Kevin has some of the best positive energy I've felt in a person. And through his love for running and exercise, he's found a way to cope with his challenges and help others cope with theirs, both physically and mentally. This is a guy that ran 52 marathons in a year, ran from Paris to London, started a run club with his friend Claire. You can check that out on their website, Run Things, and has a podcast called Run Things also. He's a father, husband, and role model to many people. It's hard to talk about suicide and mental illness. There's a stigma and that scary death thing that is attached to it. It makes it a taboo subject, but it should be talked about and taken very seriously. I hope the message from this podcast that reaches out to people, especially to people having suicidal thoughts or anyone that knows anyone dealing with suicidal thoughts or mental illness, is that you're not alone. There are people who care that you can talk to, and you can survive this. Here's my conversation with Kevin Betts on No Excuses. Kevin Betts, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Hey, Sean, it's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. I love that, man. That accent. We used to always say that British accent, correct?
Yeah,
I'm saying it. You can insult people, and we don't even know that we're being insulted over here. Lovely to meet you, Sean. You're such an idiot. Oh, thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, we do sarcasm particularly well over in the UK.
Yeah, self-deprecation, all that stuff. You guys mastered it, man. Yeah, the whole thing. So thank you for being on the podcast. Now, I tell you, I was introduced to you by, I'm looking at my email right here. It was by Lewis Burr. He's our senior brand marketing executive over there in the UK. Kevin, first, let me ask you this. We did decide first, Lewis, out of Lewis' recommendation, and we think it was a great idea, we will be featuring you for our Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and hopefully we'll be rolling this out for the Suicide Prevention Day on September 10th. So thank you again for being that representative for us, and that's awesome.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thanks for giving me the platform to speak about the things we're going to speak about.
So, let me ask you about, before we start talking about your great story, your very powerful story, 52 marathons, and was that in 2011?
Yeah,
is that
that's
what I'm
right.
hearing?
So it was over a decade ago. I'm still dining out on it whenever I can. I was much younger, much fitter back then. And it kind of segues nicely into the entire story, basically. But in 2011, I wanted to do something that didn't necessarily raise money for mental health charities, but raised awareness of them. And I realised that I was approaching the demographic of people where suicide is the main killer of people within that age group, men in particular. Middle-aged men are more susceptible to suicide worldwide than any other disease in the developed world. And it really, really scared me. And I kind of thought, well, as a bloke going into that and being a typically sporty man, massive fan of rugby over here, which your American listeners will go, what the hell is that? It's like American football without the pads, and all of that. I was kind of the kind of guy that shouldn't be talking about this stuff because it's such a taboo subject. So I decided I needed a platform to talk about it all. And I thought I'd take on what, interestingly, the press over here in the UK classed as a crazy kind of challenge. And that was to run 52 marathons in a year. So there are various rules and things like that. They all had to be witnessed. They were all under 4 hours in duration, which was a hell of an undertaking. But throughout that year, as well as the physical challenge, and it was really, really hard, I kind of blogged my way through it. That was back when vlogs weren't a thing and podcasts weren't a thing. And wrote about my experiences, why I was running, talked about how mental health was perceived in the media and to the public, and basically tried to start conversations. And honestly, that year, sort of by accident, completely changed the direction of my life in so many ways. And it's kind of led me to this conversation today, I suppose, and the hundreds of conversations I've had with different groups of people in the last decade.
Yeah, wonderful that it did that. It's almost like that destiny type thing that you took by running. You've always been a runner, is that correct? Since you were a kid? When did you come into this?
Yeah, sort of. So I was, as a kid, I guess what you class as a fairly talented sports person. Good cross-country runner, good on track. Played a lot of team sports, so rugby and soccer and things like that. My passion was basically competition. It wasn't necessarily a particular sport. But I had to kind of give up running. I had to give up playing rugby when I was 19 because of a fairly catastrophic injury. And so I took running up again after 5 or 6 years without doing much of it at all, apart from in sports. And I just found it gave me everything I wanted from activity. It gave me the ability to go out there and hammer myself, really run as hard as I could so I could taste that blood in my throat and, hear my heart in my ears and all of that. But equally, if I wanted to, I could go out and plod as slowly as I wanted to and feel like I could go on forever and anything in between. And so it gave me a kind of an outlet physically and mentally to go and be or not be, or all of those philosophical things that you can imagine running would be.
Yeah, it's great when you say that because my Hoorah to Heroes people here, they put on this hill raiser run. A gentleman by the name of Deputy J, we call him. He's actually one of you blokes, but he's been living here. He's a deputy out here in West Virginia, and he puts on our hill raiser run where he's running us up mountains and we're climbing ropes and all that stuff. And I'll go out there every year to do it. And we went out this year. It was on a Thursday. We went out, and he had me out there at nighttime because a bunch of us were putting up the ropes for some of the hills we had to climb. And I hadn't done that in a while, man. And like you said, it exhausted me. Everything was sore. It gets to the point, I don't know what it is, but you get so exhausted where it's almost like your physical and mental and spiritual becomes one to get you through all this. And then when it was done, I forgot how great that feels. I mean, even though it's painful and all, how great that feels, like you just mentioned, and how addictive it is. Yeah. I guess the endorphins and all that. That's pretty hard. You're a runner like that. What is the draw for you? What is that feeling?
You know what? The draw for me has changed over the years. It's not what it was. So I think I'm done with the crazy challenges. Frankly, I haven't got a year to give up now. I've got a kid and a family. Back then when I was younger and more able, I was kind of, able to be more selfish. It used to be the idea of doing things that most other people hadn't done. I think, let's gender stereotype here for a moment, but men are competitive by their nature. Men want to beat other men. Men want to do things that other people haven't done. They want to be better and stronger and bigger. It's, to an extent, it's an innate thing in us, and I've definitely perpetuated that over the years. But equally, men, they will challenge themselves until they don't want to give up physically. But mentally, men do give up more than others, and that's why they choose to die. And I kind of realised that the marriage between mental and physical health was such a close and strong one that you can't disaggregate it. You can't untangle these things. They become one and the same for a lot of people. And for me, running was, and always will be therapy. But back then it was therapy in that I could go and target, my dream is a sub 3-hour marathon. I'm not super fast, but I'm fairly fast. All the stats say I should be able to run one. I've done a 1:21 half marathon, a 37-minute 10K. Like, I can fly, but I've run a 3:01 marathon, and that almost killed me. And I mean, I was afterwards, and it was Berlin, and I trained for 6 months and given everything, and still failed. But I think, to cut a long story short, for me, running is often a metaphor for what's happened in my life, in that I feel like when I'm running, I always want to give up. I always want to stop because it hurts so much. And we can all stop, right? You talk about your hill raiser, and you could stop, but you don't want to stop, and you'll do everything not to stop. And that, for me, was really, really important. And to finish an event or a race, having given everything, frankly, chasing the pain, which I think would be the name of my book if I ever write one, would be Chasing Pain. It's about not stopping until you're over that line. And it's all because, metaphorically, my dad took his own life when I was 19, and he did give up. And I think when I run, when I'm buried, when I'm deeper than I think I can possibly go mentally, I go there. I go to how he must have been feeling at that time, and I go to the place where I think I haven't got a right to give up because I'm nowhere near as affected as he was. And, I can choose to stop right now. And some people don't have the ability or the option to stop feeling the way they feel. Mental illness isn't something that you choose to have. It's not because you're weak, it's because you're wired differently. And no matter how much love somebody has, no matter how much access to things they have, no matter how much money or physical health, it just doesn't work for some people. And it's my way of nodding to those people, and to my old man in particular, that I won't give in. I just won't stop. I might not always achieve what I want to achieve, but it's never my brain that gives in. It's always a part of my body, and that's now becoming more and more frequent as I get older. There's always a different part of my body that's screaming at me. But honestly, I don't think many people are mentally stronger than me. And I remember a quote from Will Smith, the actor, and he said, I may not be the fittest, I may not be the strongest, I may not be the most able and the most naturally talented, but you put me on a treadmill next to another man and put me at the same speed as him, and the only way that I'll lose is if I collapse. And that's basically how I feel.
I thought for a second you were going to say, keep my wife's name out of your mouth.
I was thinking about that. But, old Will Smith, let's say.
I love what you're saying there, because this is sort of like what I talk about to the mutters when I'm at the start line talking to them, have them take that knee and we're in a circle. I believe that what they're doing out there at these events is a metaphor for they're sharpening their survival skills, kind of like what you were saying earlier, innate in us as young men. We think we've evolved, but we're still out there hunting.
Yeah.
We're still out there protecting our territory, and all these physical things that we do. Thank God if you could find it in a hobby or a fun way, sneakily, if that's a word, you are actually, in my opinion, you're honing those survival skills, both physically and, more importantly to me, mentally, as you just mentioned. So now for you, this took on you taking on, I guess, what we were saying, this powerful story in your life when you were a kid. Your father, I believe you said, committed suicide. Talk about that with us for a minute.
Yeah. So I grew up over here in the UK and I don't want this to sound like a sob story, because I do very well for myself. I'm not rich, but I'm healthy and fit and have a good job and a salary and a house and all of that. So I don't want people to kind of go, oh, this poor guy, But I do have a bit of a sob story, having said all of that. So I grew up on a council estate in the UK, social housing. I don't know what you guys in the States would call it, but basically we lived in fairly abject poverty. It was I was born in the early 80s, and my dad went from job to job, often lost his jobs, and it took a real toll on, a man who was a man's man, who provided for the family and did all those archetypal man things. And he was always a bit weird. I had the most love in my family. We had the best time, but we had the best time with nothing. What we lacked in money, we had in love and fun and all of that sort of stuff. But, I think my dad, it took its toll on him. My parents both literally went without food at times to provide for us, to give us the things so that we didn't miss out. And at the time, of course, as a kid, you don't realise. You just they're wonderful, beautiful people, but they're innately selfish. They don't understand. And I think as a parent now, I know that because I hide the tough things from my son, because they shouldn't have to go through it. And it's only now I realise what my parents must have gone through. And locally, on our council estate, my dad was known as Crazy Dick. His name was Dick, it wasn't just an insult. But we never really thought much of it. But, he was always really up and down and could go off on, tangents and be present and not be present and all of that sort of thing. But of course, when you grow up with it, you don't realise that it's different because it's all you have. It's your only reference point. Having said that, when I was 15 and 16, he went downhill mentally. And we had a really challenging relationship, me and him. I think because I was, hitting adulthood, I was then bigger than him, stronger than him, and that probably challenged his kind of masculinity and that sort of thing. But also, I was pretty smart at school. I was uber competitive, so I was going to do well. And I think, I was probably, I wasn't a very nice person to him at times. And it kind of, it brought to a head a whole kind of realm of challenging aspects of our relationship, having for the decade before that had such a strong relationship that he would take me to any sporting event that I was taking part in. He would beg, borrow and steal to take me to trials and activities and competitions, to places where we couldn't afford to go, and he would give up his things for me to be there. And then I kind of threw it all back in his face when I was in my teenage years, my formative years. It's taken me a long time to kind of come to terms with the fact that, it's not my fault, but I contributed. We all contributed to his positive and his negative mental health. So when I was 15, 16, he was kind of at his lowest ebb, and he tried to take his own life, and luckily, very luckily, he didn't succeed. But in the intervening kind of 3 years, so, at 16 he tried and failed, but when I was 19 he tried and succeeded, and in the middle time there were 7 or 8 other occasions when he did attempt to die. So for me it was always a kind of an inevitability. It couldn't be stopped, in my opinion, back then. Now that opinion has completely changed knowing what I know now, and there are interventions and things that can be had. But he did ultimately pass away, and it had a hugely profound effect on me. And you'll notice, I can talk about these things being God knows how many years on, 18, 19 years on nearly. I can talk about it with a level of reservedness and lack of emotion, not because I don't care, but because I've had these conversations. I've spent a long time coming to terms with the idea that somebody chose not to be present, even though they have so much. And, to think that somebody wants to die and does die, even though they have a family that constantly tells them they love them, is a very bitter pill to swallow. And it's only through doing the learning that I've done over the years that's made me realise that, we don't think straight when we're mentally ill. We don't think straight when our mental health is different. And that's an important distinction as well. I know I go off on tangents, but mental illness is a diagnosed thing that, a doctor says you have this and it's why you act like you do. It kind of vindicates people and gives them purpose for their differences. We never think of people having mental health problems or mental health bad times, in the UK especially, I think, because we're very kind of stiff upper lip. We don't treat it like we do physical health. Sometimes you'll have a cold, right? You don't need to go to a doctor for a diagnosis of having a cold. It's just that you're under the weather and not great. Your physical health isn't brilliant. So you'll take your vitamins, you'll drink your orange juice, you'll, have good food, you'll relax and rest up. But if you have bad mental health, it's almost like it's a binary thing. You either go to the doctors and have a diagnosis that's very serious, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all the classics, or you don't have bad mental health, you're just making it up because you want a day off. And they're the kinds of things that back then, for sure, my dad worked a manual job. He couldn't have gone to the guy who managed the yard where he worked and said, my mental health's quite bad, do you mind if I don't come in? Because he would have been laughed out of the place and or fired. Whereas now, the whole dynamic's changing, and honestly, I think I'm helping in my very, very tiny way to contribute to that, because I normalise the conversations by having these conversations. As a man, and 10 years ago I was a much younger man, I could go to businesses and to schools as a sporty bloke and use sport as a vehicle to pass a message on about mental health, to talk about my 52 marathon challenge, to talk about the fact that I ran from Paris to London, to talk about, anything in between. But it was just there almost as a distraction, because it scares people if somebody like me stands up and goes, my dad killed himself. Because everyone's like, oh my God, what do I say to that? So it's, and it's why I often, when I deliver the talks that I do, I use a slideshow, not because I want to show loads of pictures of myself, but because people then don't have to watch the face of a guy talking about a parent deciding to die, even though these conversations should be had as a normal thing. I think that's how everything that I do came about. But I will say, as a result of my dad dying, I don't like having these conversations. I don't want to go out there and spill the beans about the weaknesses in my family and the weaknesses in my dad. It's an awful thing to think about. But I can dissociate myself because I know that people do listen, and I know that those conversations are had afterwards. And if it's the snowball theory. Sometimes something I say to one person will roll on and they'll say it to another person, and before you know it, if the message is good, it will pick up a lot of steam. And that's how I'm here. I did the 52 marathons in 2011. In 2012, I ran from Paris to London, 164 miles. And people started to listen. I was getting published in newspapers in the UK, and people were contacting me to deliver talks and stuff. And a company got in touch with me and said, we provide personal training qualifications. If you blog for us, we'll let you train as a personal trainer for free. And I thought, brilliant, a free qualification. So I did that, and then I realised, after doing some research and qualifying as a PT, that PTs do two things. They either help people to lose weight, or they help people to get massive muscles. There's nobody really out there who specialises in helping people with their mental health. So that's now my specialism, is supporting people, especially endurance athletes, on a couple of things. One is goal setting, achieving things that they think are unachievable. And the other one is to help them to realise that it is a therapeutic activity. For people who don't feel comfortable seeing a therapist, if people can't access a therapist, afford one, they've got a long waiting list, exercise can help. It can release those endorphins. It can give you small wins. And it can, more importantly than anything else, give you purpose. Because sometimes people don't feel they can get out of bed because there is nothing to get out of bed for. If they have one person, me, in this situation, who they are contacting to say, what am I doing today? And I just say, you've got a 5k run, you've got to go really hard, or you've just got to go for a walk, or whatever. They feel somebody's listening without having to open up their entire heart. And it makes a big, big difference. And that's how I started working with the UK charity Mind, who are, the UK's biggest mental health charity. I got in touch with them and said, my dad killed himself. It made me really sad. I'm trying to use it as a positive. Can I help? And before you know it, I'm talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands of people at their events, and helping, what I'm doing, essentially, Sean, in this huge, long story, simply, is I'm adding the smallest bit of value to the death of my dad. I'm making it not worthwhile. It's not at all worthwhile. I'd rather never have met you and he still be here. However, it's added just that tiny bit. It's made it that tiny bit worthwhile, because I know that for his death, maybe a few other people are now not dying.
Let me say this. First of all, it's not a sad story. Maybe some people will see it that way or interpret that way. It's a life story. And it's not just, in my opinion, a life story. It's life's story. This exists, like you said, now that you are out and you're talking, and you see like thousands, millions even, of people that somehow have depression, somehow are thinking about killing themselves, somehow mental illness, of course. So I hope that anyone that's listening don't see this as a sad story I hope that they see this, that this is going on around you. And whether you realize it or not, you have some connection to it. It may be in your family. It may be the neighbors. Somebody you know is going through this. A lot of times they may even be trying to hide it. That's one of the, and again, in my opinion, you can speak more on this. That's one of the really crucial things with depression and that feeling of suicide, is that I always sort of related to like when lions are hunting, how they'll single out that one zebra or whatever it is that they're hunting out of the rest of the pack. And that's kind of like what I've noticed how depression and this feeling of suicide works, where you isolate yourself. And all of a sudden you feel like you are the only one that feels this. Nobody understands. Nobody gets it. And it's true. A lot of people don't if you haven't experienced it. So that's the importance to me of what you're doing, what you're talking about, and beyond the, is it sad? Is it happy? No, it's life. It's life that we're talking about. So it's very important what you are saying right there. Your father, did you have any inkling of mental illness when you were young, or your mom or your family when he was young?
That's a difficult one. I think in hindsight, absolutely, all the telltale signs were there. But, I've said this a couple of times already, but my dad was a man's man, So I remember once he tripped down some stairs at my high school, and it was funny. But he got up and two of his fingers were pointing in the opposite direction, and he dislocated them both. Now, I'd have cried and gone to the hospital. I would still cry. I'm 37 now, I'm 38. And I still cry and go to the hospital. But he relocated them himself. He was that kind of guy. And I was like, oh my God, my dad's a superhero. So he wouldn't have even thought, he would have just thought it was normal for him. Not normal for everybody, but normal for him. He was a recreational drug user. He often, hung about with people who were fairly unsavoury, I suppose, not good for his physical or his mental health. He was a challenge to himself and to others, and he knew all of that stuff. But would he have brought the two together and said he was mentally ill? No, absolutely not. He had a very difficult upbringing. It's not my place to go into his personal upbringing. I can only talk about my life and my experiences, but it certainly wasn't a standard nuclear family that he was in. There were suicides in the family before him, and it's really interesting because suicide isn't genetic. It most certainly isn't genetic. However, it is what I would class as socially inherited. It becomes more acceptable when we witness it because it becomes something. People who aren't affected by suicide don't tend to consider it as an option, But if we've been exposed to it, there is evidence out there that suggests that, we are more likely to attempt ourselves. And I certainly see that in my life. I thankfully have never been mentally ill. My brother won't mind me saying he suffers himself and has been on the verge of suicide before. And I think if I'd have told my dad 20 years ago that if he kills himself, his son might kill himself, he might have thought twice. But you can't instill that in people. You can't predict the future. You can't tell people what's in the future. You can only reaffirm with them that the future is probably better than it is now. He would certainly have been diagnosed with a mental illness had he sought out the right people and had the conversations. But he didn't. And, c'est la vie, or say isn't la vie now, life isn't there for him. But he probably would regret it if he could. I'm not a religious person, I'm not spiritual in the least. But if he could look and see us, he would see that he's missing out on 5 grandchildren, 3 marriages, family, friends, all being happy, me becoming what I've become and my brother and my sister becoming what they've become. But when somebody's ill, you're right, they're enclosed. It's not that they lock themselves away, it's that they think that people don't want to see them and or people can't see them. And so you could be ripping out this box that they're locked in, but to them it's just got layers and layers and layers. It's an infinite thing. We can keep going at it, but unless they help from the inside out, and that's a terrible analogy, you're never going to get to them, and it's that difficulty. And it's why treatment for people with mental illness, people with suicidal tendencies, is much, much harder than prevention in young people. It's proven that if you work with children on their mental health, if you work with children on suicide prevention, not in stopping their parents from killing themselves, but reaffirming in them that they shouldn't kill themselves when they're older, that's much more effective than treating it.
What is your opinion? Because I've heard people say, and it's kind of controversial, even celebrities that have said that when treating suicidal tendencies or depression, people shouldn't do meds. They shouldn't use meds. I guess they've found some other way. I don't know if it's nutrition, what it is, but what has been your experience with this?
Yeah, medicine's an interesting one. My wife's a doctor, so kind of I have an insight from her to an extent. I think often people think that meds for mental illness is a weakness, that we should be strong enough to overcome something. People will often feel like if you take meds, you're cheating your way to being better, or it's just covering up things. What we have to remember is that mental illness is the widest spectrum of medicine that you can get. As an example, if you go to a hospital and you go to a cancer ward, everybody will have probably a certain type of cancer, or will be within a certain specialist area. You go to a geriatric ward, it's for old people. You go to a paediatrics ward, it's for children. You go to a gastrointestinal ward, it's for your stomach and your tract, and that's about it. A mental health ward can have everything from bipolar disorder to narcissistic personality disorder to schizophrenia to bulimia and anorexia. Somebody with anorexia is physically very, very slim a lot of the time. But somebody with bipolar disorder appears normal, as we'd class it. So it's the widest range, which is why people with mental illnesses often feel like they're compartmentalised in that way. Each of those people has different issues. Somebody with schizophrenia is completely different to somebody with anorexia. So the meds that they would need are completely different as well. I don't think that meds fix things, but I think they help to fix things. I think you have to look a lot more holistically and realise that so much of mental illness is sociogenetic. It's driven not just by our bodies but by what's around us. People from poorer backgrounds are more susceptible to have mental illness. So you need to address the cause from that end whilst doing the treatment. And medication for a lot of people is absolutely critical. We have hormonal imbalances where our synapses don't work properly with some mental illnesses. So without the medication, that you might be getting a better diet, but it's not going to fix the synapses. It's not going to change that hormonal balance in your brain. If you can cure yourself of a mental illness, if you can improve your mental health without meds, fantastic, brilliant for you. But you shouldn't look at somebody who's taking meds and say, that's the wrong way. Because if they said to you it's the wrong way to not do it, that's not okay either. We are each individual animals, and we needed to be treated as individuals and not with they've got that, so give them this. It's about a huge range of treatments and not about taking a tablet.
When I'm listening to you and what I've seen of you on your social media, very we were talking before. I love your humor. I love the vibe that you have. How about yourself? Do you have a depression? Do you have any kind of depression going on? I feel like how do I say this? Like with myself, I have those days where when I wake up, it's, oh my gosh, I don't want to get up. Sometimes I take a 5-hour and just to spark me and get me going. If there's something that I have to do, like you said, almost getting to purpose, then for some reason I'm able to get up, get going. But if there's nothing I have to do, sometimes I'm just, you just feel like a wet blanket is on you. And it's never to the point where I've felt suicidal, but to the point where it's a struggle. Now, I think that, like I said, when I look at people like yourself, and then I've been told myself, there's those peaks and valleys that kind of hide it. One minute we're very funny, full of life, we're encouraging people and all that. But then there's that other time when you come down low, and you're not feeling that any of that with you?
So I've never been diagnosed with a mental illness. I've always felt stable-ish. Just like you, just like anybody, I have ups and downs. I have a non-medical intricate knowledge of mental illness, I'd say, through lived experience of the people I love, and through working with the kinds of people that I do. And I think that's probably made me more resilient as a result. And I'm not saying that I'm definitely never going to have mental illness, but I'm super strong mentally, and I feel fantastic. I feel like I'm a pragmatist and an optimist. I can struggle for sure. My wife, who is incredible and patient, she will say that I can't stop, that I can't turn off, that I can rarely sit down. I always have harebrained ideas. I'm a starter, not a completer. Run things is my business, and I adore it. I love it. It was created by accident with a good friend of mine who I met through the mental health campaigning. But it's not my proper job, and yet I probably spend 15 to 20 hours a week doing it. I have a full-time job on top of that, and a son, and I run, and I train, and I give people free personal training. And probably it's all because I don't want to be left alone with my thoughts. So, I'm not the healthiest person mentally, but I channel what I can into the good things, and really hope that it makes me stronger and gives me the kind of desire, the experiences to carry on. And I've met some incredible people, different people, weirdos, freaks, lunatics, crazy people, gorgeous people, soul-destroyingly sad people, and I've enjoyed every one of those interactions for whatever reason and for whatever the outcome. And it gives me fun things to talk about in the pub. And that's what I treat my life as. If I don't have anything to say to people, then it must be because I'm not doing something that I want to be doing, because the things we want to do, we go and talk about. So if I'm quiet, I'm not doing those things, and then I give myself a kick up the backside, nearly swore then, and I change my outlook, and I always have a goal. I've got to have a goal. If I don't have something I'm working towards, then I do feel empty, and I am challenged.
You're a father, I believe you mentioned a son, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
How old is he now?
Jesse, he's 8, unbelievably, which makes me feel so old, Sean, I'll be honest with you. It's really funny. I delivered the talk to the guys at Tough Mudder, kind of a team meeting type thing, and I said to them, and it's true every time I say it, I can talk about the death of my dad, the immensely sad death of my dad, with a stone cold face and not shed a tear. You ask me to talk about my son, and I will well up with pride and joy and sadness and all of those things. He's changed me completely, because I'm no longer the competitive beast that I used to be, because frankly, I just want to impress him. I spend my life trying to impress my son, who is incredibly difficult to impress, and my wife, who is slightly easier to impress, but also I get more rubbish from. And he's just wonderful, and he's a chip off the old block, and he knows how my dad died. He's known since he was 3 or 4. He knows, we had very, very careful conversations, but I never wanted to hide something from him. So to him, Grandad Dickie chose not to be alive. We don't use strong terms like killed himself or committed suicide. But he does know that Grandad Dickie chose not to be here, and that it's really sad, and that's why I do the things that I do. And I think it sometimes goes over his head, which I think is amazing, because it shows that he's resilient, and it also shows, more importantly, that he thinks nothing of it, that suicide is just a way to die, and that it's not this taboo thing that no one ever talks about. But yeah, he's just wonderful. He's the best kid. We did our first ever Tough Mudder just last weekend, and we went as a family. So he did the Little Mudder, the kids one, did a mile, and my wife did the 5K, and I did the 15K, and we had some friends with us. And honestly, I save no money. Right, I've got a reasonable job. My wife's a doctor. We do all right. I save no money because we spend all of what we have on experiences and travelling and doing the things that I never did as a kid. And, I sent some pictures across to Louis earlier, actually, of the Tough Mudder that we did, and maybe you'll put them out with the podcast. But, God, it was amazing. It was absolutely phenomenal. And watching each other and laughing. God, did we laugh at each other. Not with each other, mostly at each other. Falling off things and being filthy and all of that. It was just perfect. And I always have that 1% of sadness when I'm at those events, because if my dad were there, he'd have a camera in his hand and he'd be taking he wouldn't take part, he'd hate it, but he would be taking the photos and laughing at us, and he can't be. But it's bittersweet because we wouldn't be doing it, I don't think. I would be a lot more chilled out as a human being if he were here, so, it's really bittersweet.
That's awesome. Suicide tendencies, again, something that you do see with teens. They go through a lot. Their ceiling in life isn't, they don't have much perspective more than somebody actually bullying them or whatever is going on at the house, whatever the reason might be, mental illness included. Do you talk to children? Do you talk to teens when you're out there? And also, what do you say to parents so that they may be aware of this in their children?
Yeah, I do. I think probably 75% of the talks that I go out and give, and I just want to say as well, it's important because I never charge for the work that I do. This is all and always will be free for me. It's not something that I'd ever be comfortable taking payment for. Sometimes I'll get a kickback, I got an entry to Tough Mudder, for instance, but essentially, I do this thing because I want to, not because I can make money from it. So I don't charge schools or businesses to go in and deliver these sessions. But I do go into schools and I talk to a lot of 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and boys are boys, and girls are wonderful. They will sit and they will listen and they will be respectful and they will ask questions and say, I'm worried about my friend. Boys are changing, and sometimes you're surprised by them, but if I were to stereotype them, they elbow each other and one of them will make a joke because they're nervous, and it's really difficult. But if you can win over just one of a group, then the group are won. It just takes convincing one person to have that conversation. And it's a really difficult conversation, which is why I use sport. Going back to the running thing, they can appreciate a conversation about sport and interspersing it with mental health rather than talking about mental health and interspersing it with sport. So it becomes much more palatable to them. And once they realise that me, someone who's done lots of amazing physical achievements, will cry, we'll have conversations, we'll talk about really difficult things, they become much more receptive to it. And their parents do too. I think one thing we never realise as school children is just what other kids are going through. Because the kids that are open and honest are the ones that are mocked and bullied for being open and honest. And they will be mocked and bullied by the kids who have worse stuff going on at home, but they don't want people to know that those worse things are going on. Really good friend of mine who I've known for 30 years, met him at primary school. Only last year did I have a conversation in a pub with him where he said to me, and to me, his family were the normal family. To me, his family was where I went when my family life was not great at the time, and I'd go and stay there overnight and, eat takeaway with them and have fun. And he said to me, I used to sometimes go to school and I wouldn't see my mum for a couple of days because she just couldn't get out of bed. He said, as an 11-year-old, I was making my own sandwiches and putting jam in some bread, and that was basically all I would have because my mum could not get out of bed. I would have never imagined that, and it took him 30 years to tell me. And they're the conversations I want people to have when they're 11 and not 39. That's the difference. But we daren't for some reason. And I think we would be hugely surprised if one boy in a group said, "Guys, I'm really struggling. I don't know what it is, but I just don't feel okay." And not only that, but for somebody to be, in my opinion, even braver, because this is the biggest difficulty we have. And I don't know whether you guys across the pond are the same, but we are too proud in the UK and we're too scared of something happening just to go up to somebody and say, "Are you all right?" Because it will make a difference, you know? I remember a couple of years ago, I was at a huge train station in the UK, and somebody was sat at the end of the platform and they were crying and sat on a bench. And instead of asking them if they were okay, people were moving away like they were infectious or, you know, going to explode or something. And I went up to them and, you know, I was that typical mental health guy and went up and said, "Are you all right?" And this girl said, "My husband's left me and I don't know what to do." And my first thing that I said to her, which is a really difficult thing to say, was, "Are you thinking of dying?" Because she was at a train station and she was crying and those other things. And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, there's no need for that." And I was very British. "Let's go and get a cup of tea." I genuinely said, "Let's go and get a cup of tea." And we went and we had a cup of tea. And then I took her to the first aid place and, you know, I passed her on. And that's not because I know what to do. It's not because I'm trained. It's because in my heart, that's what I'd want somebody to do to me. And it doesn't matter whether you're 10 years old or 60 years old, to have the bravery to say to somebody, "Are you okay?" could be the thing that stops them dying. It might not be, but it could be. And wouldn't you love to be strong enough and big enough to one day say, "I might have saved somebody's life"?
You made me think of a story, and I'm going to butcher this. I don't know how accurate I'm going to be on this. When I was living in the Bay Area, there was a gentleman who walked to the Golden Gate Bridge, and I think he had written beforehand that if someone says something to him, then he won't jump. He was going there to jump, and no one said anything to him. So he did jump. But that's what popped in my head when you were saying that. It's hard, though, man. It's yeah, I think it's like you said. I don't think it's just a British thing. Maybe you guys have it more, but I think it's a worldly where we're not looking for conflict in life. Another code, I guess, in our survival. And you don't want to say the wrong thing. I mean, that's a heck of a responsibility, Kevin.
Yeah.
That people would say, "Hey, can you talk to my friend?" Or, "Hey, I'm really sad. Can you help me? Can you?"
Yeah, and
isn't that scary?
I've had a lot of people in the past, probably rightly, but I've not always dealt with it in the perfect way, get in touch with me personally and say, "I want to die. Can you help me?" And honestly, the answer is no. I'd love to say yes, and I'd love to sit down and have coffee. But if I said yes to everybody who came to me, one, I'd have no time in the day. And two, it would probably push me so far down that I would struggle, really struggle. So we have to, when you go on an aeroplane, right, and they do the safety thing, which half the people don't listen to, what they say is, if the oxygen masks drop down, you must put your own one on first before you help those around you. It's exactly the same with mental health. You need to make sure before you help other people that your own mental health is strong enough and good enough that you can take that bit of battering. You know, to have the confidence and to not take on the burden of other people's woes, because that will sink somebody. It doesn't matter how big that person is, it will sink them. So yeah, people have contacted me and said, "Can you help me?" And the best I've been able to do is refer them and to say, you know, these are the people that could help you. I'm not a trained professional, but I've got the love and the knowledge to want to help people. But then conversely, I've had other people get in touch and say, "What you said made a difference, and I was able to share with my brother or do this." And I'll tell you a fantastic story, probably my favourite story and the best example of how doing something lovely can get you rewards that you wouldn't expect. Obviously, apart from coming on the Tough Mudder podcast. And so when I did my 52 marathons, it was October in that year. I'd done about 35 of them, and I'd just written a blog about, there was a soccer player over here in the UK who, you know, had millions of pounds but chose to die. And I talked about how you don't need to be poor to die. And I wrote this blog, and then a few days later I had a question and answer session on Twitter. And this lady got in touch with me and she said, "Thanks so much, it was amazing." Of course it was. And she said, "I've got a question, what's your dream marathon?" And I have an obsession with New York, Sean. I love New York. It's the best place I've ever visited. And it's the only place I ever want to go back to over and over again. And at the time, I'd never been. And I said, "I'd love to do the New York Marathon one day. Not this year because it's too expensive." I was self-funding my entire 52 marathon challenge. It cost me about £6,000 in total. So there was no way that I could do that. And she said, "Oh, okay, thanks very much. I just want you to know that, my uncle chose to die." And I went to bed, thought nothing of it. The next day I woke up, checked my emails, and in my email inbox was a return flight from London Gatwick to JFK. And then after that there was an email from this woman, and I swear this is true, and it was just complete serendipity. Turns out she was quite an affluent lady. She lived on the Upper East Side in New York. I did not know any of this. I didn't try and make this contrived thing. And she said, "I'm really lucky. I've got plenty of money, but I haven't got all the love. I want you to come and do the New York Marathon." And this was October, and for those who run marathons will know you don't get into New York Marathon a month before. It sells out and the places all go. And I said to her, "It's incredible, but probably won't get in." But I threw it out there. I contacted the organisers, and being, dare I say, typically American, they were like, "Yeah, great idea." So they had me over, and they gave me a free entry to the New York Marathon. Not only that, but when I got there, they'd actually reprinted their New York Marathon program that they give to all 50,000 runners. And I had a double-page spread in the New York Marathon program about my challenge, about mental health, about my dad, how sad it was, but how this lady from the Upper East Side got in touch and said, "Come and do it." So I got a free trip to the States to run a marathon, probably, don't tell London I said this, but probably the biggest marathon in the world, and met this incredible person. And it's all because I dared to share. And that's, not everybody's going to get that, but you put enough out there, and it's like doing the lottery, you throw something in the air and something will take. And it was incredible. I had the best time, and I've done New York Marathon twice now. I've been to the city 4 times. I will go again and again. And it holds such a great place because of it.
Yeah, you had a great picture in your thumbnails that you sent to us. It was a wonderful picture. Okay, so let me ask this, because I hate these things when I'm running out of time with people, It's like all of a sudden it's like I look up, oh man, it's almost an hour already. So obviously I'm loving speaking with you. So someone calls you again. I'm feeling bad. I feel like I'm going to just jump off a bridge. Who is it that you refer them to?
So in the UK, it's a charity called the Samaritans. I'm really sorry, I don't know if they're present in the States. I imagine you have so many different charities. But Google is really smart, right? And if you Google suicide, the first thing that will come up is, are you thinking of taking your own life? So Google will use AI to refer you to the right place. So honestly, if somebody's feeling really, really down, if they Google suicide, it will come up not with how to die, but how not to die. And that's really smart. For me, that's peak tech. I have no idea. I'm a stupid middle-aged man. I don't know how that works. But yeah, in the UK, I'll refer them to Samaritans. If I know them myself, I will have the conversation with them. And if I don't, I will ask them if they are okay for me to talk to one of their relatives. And if they are, they'll give me a close relative's number and I'll give them a call. Because the last thing I want is to say to somebody, "I haven't got time, go away." Because if they die and I hear about that, that's going to sit with me for my life. So I'll push them towards the people who know this stuff professionally and frankly not as, dare I say, as a hobby, like I do in many ways.
What do you say to someone out there that has a loved one that has just passed and that they're dealing with that? Because I'm sure that's hard on that end also.
Yeah, that was me. That's the thing I can talk from personally. And I say to that person that it gets easier. It doesn't go away. It will always be with you. It will challenge you. It will make things really difficult. It will make you question life itself. And it will make you question whether the person who chose to die loved you or not. And it will make you question whether it's your fault that they're dead. The answer to all those things are the positive things. It's not your fault. You probably couldn't have done anything else. They had something going on that was beyond you, that they did love you, and they would still love you if they were here. I'd say to them they need to make sure that they talk to people, that they get help, that they share, and that they're not scared to say, "I'm not okay." Because we can burden ourselves and think that we have to remain strong, and I did that. And it took me the longest time. It probably took me 10 years to come to terms with the fact that I may have contributed to my dad dying. And I may have done. but I'm not the cause. And one person rarely ever is the cause for somebody choosing to die. The impact of a suicide is huge, right? You think of, God, I'm full of analogies today, but you think of dropping a rock into a lake. Initially, that rock, that's the suicide, right? That the splash is the immediate outcome of the suicide. That's the closest possible people. But the splash goes on and on and on and on. And it will go on right to the edge of the lake. It will just get smaller and smaller, and it will become tiny ripples. But they still have a small effect on the way that the world is going round in some way. And that is what happens with suicide. It doesn't just stop. And if anybody's ever thinking of dying, it doesn't just stop when you're gone. It carries on. It's just that you're not there to witness it. So, yeah, people who have lost somebody, it's not their fault. It's definitely not their fault. And to be told that is powerful, because it will be a relief. I often get asked if I hated my dad because he chose to die. And I have a really difficult answer to that, because I never have judged him for choosing to die. And in a very weird way, him choosing to die is probably the bravest thing I've ever seen anybody do, because it's ultimate. It's an end. It's a complete stop. It's not the right thing. And sometimes we mix the idea that bravery is positive because it's not. Sometimes it's better to run away from a bear that's chasing you than it is to stop and fight it. But it doesn't mean that I don't think he's very brave for doing it. It's just the stupid bravery that he had. I've no right to judge him for it. And if he was here now and he chose to die again, I'd have no right to stop it. I would just try my best to convince him that it's not the only option.
Yeah, in my stand-up act back in the days, I used to talk about how when you get that depressed, there is a window. It kind of gets you in the moment, where nothing really matters. There's a beauty of a moment. Life pure is in the moment. That's how I feel. And the beauty of it is you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, the consequences, but you're using everything at that moment that you have experienced in the past, significant. But I would say on stage, think about this. If you're thinking about suicide, take a second, and just the glory of that is you've just written yourself a free ticket to do anything you want in this world right now. Yeah. If I get to that point, when I feel that, I will be test driving a Ferrari. Yeah. I will be owning it. I will have the best dinner of my life. Yeah. And probably not pay for it. Maybe I'll even run. I don't know. Whatever it is, I get to do whatever it is that I want to do. No rules anymore for me.
Yeah, it's the Steve Buscemi character from Armageddon. You seen Armageddon? Mm-hmm. He's going up to a rock, right? They're going to blow it up. He knows he's going to die, so he goes and borrows as much money as he possibly can, and he goes and he does whatever he wants, thinking that he'll never come back. It's the same thing. We have a very, very dark humour in my family, and it's how we get over some things. And the first time my dad tried to kill himself wasn't on purpose. It was because our car stopped working. And he was a smoker, and he used to smoke in the car, which is unfathomable now. But he opened the door with a lit cigarette in his mouth, and looked underneath the car, and fuel was pouring out from underneath the car. And we refer to that as the first time he tried to kill himself, just because it's an accidental thing. But yeah, those sorts of things, the dark humour that we have is sometimes what gets us through. And I'm not a mental health professional, as I've said a number of times, but and I often say the wrong thing. But what I always say to people who want to talk about mental health is, don't worry too much about the language, so long as you've got love with it. Because we can, some people will say you can't use the term committing suicide because it's related to crime, and technically it is. You can't use the word crazy, you can't use lunatic, blah, 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 blah. I just think so long as somebody has no malice and it helps a conversation and you feel like you can laugh at something without meaning harm to somebody else, go for it, because it normalises things. I remember, it's probably one of the last anecdotes I'll give you, but one time my dad, I was on the phone to him, and he was on his way to try to kill himself again, and he was in his car, and he said, I'm going to go and drive off a cliff, and it was this cliff, and it's a famous cliff in the UK for suicides called Beachy Head, and it's on the southeast coast of England, And I said, "Oh my God, Dad, don't do it. I'll meet you there. Don't do it. Don't do it." And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, I've just passed the Severn Bridge, which is on the way to Wales, which is the southwest of England." And he'd gotten his cliffs wrong. And he genuinely had got the wrong location. And that's what stopped him that day. You know, and it's funny, my brother and I, we laugh about it all the time. His geography was always terrible. But sometimes your car goes in the wrong direction.
That's great. And for anybody listening, please, we're not making light of the subject or anything like that, you know. But again, this is life. It includes, it's got tragedy, comedy. You've seen the faces there, and sometimes that's healing for a lot of us. Okay, so before I get you out of here, tell me about Run Things. I saw where you're the founder, you and Claire, right? And I only saw Claire, so I'm assuming that she's like Cher, except with the L, Claire. That's all she's going to have. Cher, no last name, no middle name, just Claire.
She's my right-hand person and my left-hand person. She's wonderful. She's my business partner. We created Run Things by accident. She was running a marathon about 5 or 6 years ago, needed to raise some money, and we came up with this harebrained idea to do a virtual running event. And it was really successful to the point where she raised enough money to pay off her entry to the event. But there was extra money, and for tax reasons, we had to create a business, basically. And so we created Run Things to kind of build that relationship to mental and physical health. We give 50% of our profits to mental health charities. I mean, we are fantastic mental health advocates, but terrible business people, because if we didn't give charity, we would both be able to quit our real life jobs. But it's an absolute passion of ours. It's we have a run club and some virtual events. Our biggest one is called Run Up to Christmas. And it has 5,000 people worldwide taking part, including a whole bunch of people in the States and Canada. And it really is worldwide, from Australia, New Zealand, right through Bahamas, China, people all over the place taking part. And we've created a community of people who, they don't care about how fast they are. They just care about sharing their running experiences. And that's exactly what the two of us do. And we are immensely unprofessional, terribly unorganised, financially woeful. But somehow we've got this business that sustains itself. We're both really lucky. Claire's husband is very understanding, lets her do it because it's a passion of hers. My wife is very understanding for exactly the same reason. Most of the participants in our events think that Claire and I are married because we bicker constantly, and they see that coming out on our social media channels. And it's just great. And we have a podcast and a run club and some merchandise and things like that. We never want to make millions and millions of pounds. We want to raise millions and millions of pounds. And honestly, I think if we were a proper business, people would laugh us out the park. But because we're associated with some mental health charities, they understand our foibles and they forgive us for the terrible things that we come out with.
Again, I'm looking at the website, runthings.co.uk, and again, it's just a happy place to go to also, so well done on that. Check that out, everybody. Will you be coming back to the States anytime soon? I'm
hoping so. I'm saving up, put it that way. And my wife knows that my 40th birthday is next year, and that I love New York. I'm very lucky. As a part of my 52 challenge, I ran a marathon in Orange County as well. And I've done runs in Vegas and Florida and Minnesota and some other places. I have a fascination with America because you get every type of person, every type of weather, every type of ecosystem. And honestly, I love the place. I plan on retiring in my 50s rather than my 60s or 70s so that I can travel. And I'll be that guy in a giant RV pulling up to Yosemite. Electricity, fire, the whole lot.
Oh, well done. Yeah. That's everybody's dream. That's the American dream, you know. You're fitting right in, buddy. Okay. So also real quick, how many Tough Mudders have you done? What was your first one? And have you done a World Toughest Mudder?
So this is easy. I've only done one. And it was last weekend.
What?
I honestly, can I be honest? It's probably going to make your listeners hate me. I always thought they were not worth it. I didn't get them. But I did one last weekend because Louis had said, you should come and do it, and Donald over in the UK encouraged me. And I'm full of regret because I feel like I'm now, like, I've missed years and years of it. So I've done one, but it's my first one and will not be my last. I know it's not about competition, Sean, I really do. But I did happen to come first in my heat last week. And I did a fairly good time. I did 15k in under 2 hours. And that was with a slight injury. So, world toughest mudder, who knows? The 40 plus category, I reckon I could do all right.
You do great, man. It's such a great experience, too. I don't know if you're how familiar you are to it, but it's just one of the most awesome things. You're out there, you got your tent, you got your people that are supporting you, and you're in this whole tent village. And one of my favorite times is like 3 a.m. when you're walking around and it's kind of quiet. Your runners are still out there running and you're in this little village. It feels like you're in Disney World, in the small world, actually.
Although saying that, there are some jacked up guys there, like big guys in Tough Mudder, right? I mean,
those were women. They were just huge.
And I felt like a child compared to. I mean, they couldn't run as fast as me, but boy, could they throw some stuff.
No, I think you'd love it.
Yeah.
You definitely have to come and try it. Come and visit us. If you ever come out this way, please let me know, sir. We have to hook up. And if you're ever at an event that I'm at, I'm putting the mic in your hand when you're in that start line with me, buddy, so you can talk. You got some important things and a great vibe to share.
Cool.
Before I get you out of here, I do have 2 questions that I do ask of all my guests. One was a quote that was passed down to me by one of our Legionnaires, in fact, a gentleman named Craig. I call it Craig's motto. I went to visit Craig in the hospital just before he passed away of cancer. His family told me that he had this quote that became a motto for him that he started living by when he got diagnosed again. And he passed it on to me. I passed it on to the Mudders. Over the years, they made it so popular, it actually became a song by our artist here, Darius Rucker, who used to be with Hootie and the Blowfish. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And a great song. So we always like to pass it on to our new people that come and join us here at the Mudder family. The question is, sir, the quote, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Well, I would have said Tough Mudder last weekend, but yesterday, and this is an exclusive, and to give some context, I can't swim, Sean. I'm not a swimmer. I like to think it's because I'm too muscular, so I sink, but I'm a terrible swimmer. Yesterday, I signed up for an Ironman triathlon. So that is the first time I've ever signed up for one of those, and it will be the first time I've ever done one of those, and that's next July.
Awesome. I know a lot of the listeners that have done Tough Mudders with me, one of the classic things we always say when we're giving the briefing is if you can't swim, don't go in the water. And we actually repeat it about 3 times, so I can hear them saying that when you said that. My final question to you. Okay, you're out there doing your thing. You're running, training somebody. I don't know. You're out there having fun doing what you do. And you come across a lamp. Pick it up. You do what everybody does when they find a lamp. They wipe it off. Out pops me, the genie in the lamp. Been in there for millions, trillions, gazillions of centuries. So happy that you finally freed me. Kevin, I'm not going to give you 3 wishes. I am going to give you the ultimate gift. In this moment, Kevin, I am going to give you the ears of the world. In this moment, you have the world's undivided attention. Everybody stopped what they're doing and they're listening to you right now. What do you say to the world in this moment?
It's easy, and it's a repetition of what I've been saying throughout. Commit 3 minutes per week to ask somebody if they're okay. That's it. Just 3 minutes. It's no time at all, and it could save a life.
Well done, sir. Thank you so much for this, man. I look forward to speaking with you again, getting to know you, hopefully seeing you over there. Maybe I'll get over there and be able to visit with you guys on that side. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much
for your time. Cheers, Sean.
You can find Tough Mudder on Facebook and Twitter. That will be at Tough Mudder, or on Instagram, also at Tough Mudder. Please remember you can find this podcast, No Excuses, on wherever you listen to podcasts. Guys, subscribe Let me know what you like, what you're not liking, and I will be including you as much as possible and even more in the future.
Inspirational.
Be inspired.
Inspire.
No excuses.
Motivational.
Be motivated.
Motivate.
No excuses.
No whining.
No quitting. Overcome.
No excuses.
Community. Teamwork.
Tougher
Tougher together.
No excuses.